Hey, what's up guys, Mike here. Today we're going to be doing a deep clean over here on the Avatar tank. The last time you saw this aquarium was actually right after we set it up a few weeks ago, right before I left for Aquashella. So right after I set up a tank, the last thing I want to do is have to leave for 4 days because a lot can happen to an aquarium, especially a new one, in that short amount of time. I was really concerned with algae problems. We were already starting to see a little bit of them before I left, but when we came back, things weren't that bad. So today we're going to go back in time to the footage of me doing a really nice clean on the tank. I'm going to show you how I clean my tanks, specifically, tanks like this that are kind of over aquascaped maybe, but a lot of these methods you can easily use yourself on whatever tank you have regardless of how it's aquascaped. So the first thing I do when I start a clean is I turn my filter off. This is really important because we don't want to be sucking a bunch of loose algae and debris and all kinds of whatever else is in the tank up into the filter while we're moving stuff around. We want to make sure we pull as much of the loose stuff out of the aquarium, not back into our filter. I then use my mag float to clean the glass of the aquarium. Most of the time, I'm a little lazy, I'll admit it, and I only clean the front panel, but you can detach this and do the sides as well as the back of the tank if you need to. Using a toothbrush is actually a fantastic tool for cleaning your aquarium. It's great for doing the front panel of glass on the inside down by the substrate, and you just do it really carefully, making sure not to kick up any sand if you have it in your aquarium up into the bristles. That can scratch the glass, but as long as you're careful, shouldn't be any issue. You can get into really tight spaces with it all around the tank on not just the glass, but onto some of the structures like the rocks. If you have some kind of algae that's growing on the rocks, you should brush that away real nice and gently. Or, if your rock is stationary, you can put a lot of pressure on that, and it really, really helps. I also really like to use a toothbrush to help get algae that's growing on my mosses, and also the hair grass down at the bottom. We can get a lot of hair algae growing down there, and the toothbrush, you can just kind of spin it sometimes, and you can just pull all of the algae strings up out of that plant. Once we have the glass algae removed and kind of in suspension in the aquarium, I then grab a hose, and in this case, I need to drain it into a 5-gallon bucket because this particular siphon that I have isn't long enough to get out into the backyard. If you have a drain or you have easy access to somewhere where you can drain the water, then you don't need to do it into a bucket, of course. I like to use just this tube without a traditional siphon cap on the end because the velocity of the water going into the tube is going to be a lot stronger than if you have one of those big wide caps on the end. Now this does mean if you have fish or invertebrates in your aquarium, you can easily suck them up into this siphon because it's so strong. So just keep that in mind, and if you do have livestock in your aquarium, be extra careful. Now I do this because it's really easy for me to pull out the algae from around the mosses and the structures in my aquascape. The type of algae that we have in here is very loosely attached to things. It's this kind of stringy brownish green stuff, and it's easily removed from the tank by just placing the siphon next to it. I do have to be really careful here because this siphon is strong enough to pull the moss right off of the rocks, as well as even the hair grass that's down in the substrate. It's not really rooted that well yet. I mean, it does have roots and it is held in there pretty good, but this siphon is really strong and it can easily just suck those pieces out. So I just do this all around the tank, not trying to physically remove anything other than the algae and what little detritus and stuff comes up off of the substrate. Once I feel like I have it pretty good, I then switch out this fast siphon for a slower siphon and I drain the tank down a little farther. I think I end up doing like a 50% water change on this one. That's fine with me. I don't see any need to go beyond that in this case. Plus, the more I drain the water out of this tank, the more stress I'm putting on my avatar structures, and I definitely don't want that to happen. So in this case, I'm trying to fill the tank back up faster than normal. Again, it doesn't really matter because we don't have any livestock in the aquarium that we're going to be shocking with the temperature change. The plants should be just fine. And just like that, the tank is looking a lot better. I mean, it's not perfect. You're not going to be able to get everything, especially on your first run with that fast siphon. What you can do is if you have a lot of algae and you want to go back in again, you can always fill the tank back up and repeat that fast siphoning portion of the cleanup once more. So yeah, guys, I did that water change, that cleanup, like 3 weeks ago when I got back from Aquashella, and you can see here the tank is free of that algae. Just that one cleanup was enough to kind of keep things at bay. There's not really a lot going on down at the hair grass level where it was really predominant. And yeah, I mean, there's a little bit in here, but it's not bad. I need to clean the back glass a little bit. Algae is always going to find its way onto the glass of your aquarium. It's a very common spot for it, but luckily that's really easy to deal with just using a mag float. But you know what? I think we need to add some new plants to this tank. I have a few tropical cultures over here that I want to try out that I haven't ever used before. We can't spend too much time over in the plant section because all the plants for the ancient gardenscape are over there. Don't want to give that away, but let's check out some of these cultures here real quick. So here's the first one. Can you see that? This is a horrible shot. But this is Rancho Cucamongus indicatus. That's not how you say it. This looks like it's going to be a pretty cool foreground plant. It has a really interesting leaf structure that I think will lend itself pretty nicely to the avatar theme that we have going on in the tank. And then we also have some Marsilia, something like that. Also has a pretty interesting leaf structure, another foreground plant. We're going to pop that in there as well. We have two of those cultures, one of the Rancho Cucamonga, and then we have another S. repens over here that will pop in. So the ranunculus ended up landing in the foreground of the tank in a few different places. There's some in between those rocks. And where else do we see it? Back here in the corner. A little hard to see, but I did the same thing with the S. repens. So you can see some fresh pieces of it here. You can tell it's fresh because it looks a little bit more blue, kind of the same way the ranunculus does. And that's just because it's a new plant. Over time it will transition a little bit and get a little bit more of a green color. The Marsilia also ended up in the foreground, so I just kind of placed it around in the hair grass, kind of the same way that I have the little few pieces of glosso in here, and eventually I think it'll just all kind of come together and create this mismatch of different plants, and it'll give the look that I eventually want to have. I also put some of the Marsilia up in the top here on the floating rocks, just kind of wedged it in between some of the roots that were attached to the floating rocks, and this is just an experiment, the same way I ended up doing with the hair grass up here. The hair grass is doing just fine. You know, the additions of fertilizer that I've been putting into this tank have been able to keep that plant alive despite it not being in a substrate. So I'm hoping the same thing will happen with the Marsilia up here, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Specifically though, for fertilizers, I've been using the Florin Grow and the Florin Multi made by Brightwell Aquatics, one of the channel sponsors. I've been trying it out. You know, I don't have a ton of experience with this stuff, but so far it's been working out for me. Florin Grow is specifically a nitrogen fertilizer, while the Florin Multi is everything else. So you get all your micronutrients that your plants need as well. And the reason for having them separate is just because, you know, some people might not want to be adding excess nitrogen in the nitrate form to their tank. Me, it's not so big of a deal, and honestly, it's not that big of a deal for me to have to use 2 bottles either. It's not ideal, but so far this stuff has been treating the tank pretty well, and I think that just by looking at the tank you can tell that it's been working. The 2 different species of moss that we have in the aquarium, the mini Christmas moss and the peacock moss, are both doing very well. You can see the difference here. We have the peacock moss in the back here. You can see it has a little bit more of a spiky growth. There's some here on this kind of back ridge. And then there's the mini Christmas moss here in the front that has a more lateral, almost a droopy kind of growth, but not quite. There's some more of the mini Christmas moss on this rock. And then next to it, of course, we have the mini Pellia, or what's also referred to as coral moss, even though it's not really a moss. that plant is doing exceptionally well as well. For those of you that are new to this aquarium, maybe you haven't seen it before, we are running this as a high-tech setup. So we have CO2, we have the Fluval 3.0 light up here, not running it at full blast. It's at about, I think it's like 75%, maybe a little closer to 50 actually with the total power output. That seems to do just fine for what we have in here. The filtration we have on the tank is a Fluval 206 canister filter. It's working out just perfect for me. I love this size of filter for a 40-gallon breeder, so no complaints there. But yeah, guys, I mean, that's pretty much it. We're all set now. The tank is looking really good. We're ready to add some livestock to it. That will be the next video on this aquarium. We have some fun little avatar warriors that we're going to add to our Pandora scape here. It should be pretty fun. So make sure you're subscribed. If you're new, hit the notification bell so you know when I upload that next video. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.